Hello, everybody. It's Susan, and today I'd like to talk to you about the week ahead, building up to the new moon that we have in Taurus at 7 degrees of Taurus. There's a lot of lunar things that I want to talk to you about, so you can think of them as timing, things to refer to as timing. You might want to take note of these dates and times that are coming up well, I'm going to give you dates. I won't give you specific times because very rarely does life get timed down to the minute, but the dates are interesting for you to follow. We have a very dynamic chart already right off the beginning of the week. So the Monday chart, which is the third quarter moon of the 21st of April here. By the way, I use tropical zodiac. I also use the whole sign system, and I use that in my private readings as well. I find it the most easy to understand and easy to interpret chart after having many years of working with Placidus. That's not to say Placidus is bad. You can find a video about that on my channel if you want to know more about that. Anyway, just to say, because I often get that comment, I do use whole sign charts also in my sessions. So what we have here is the product. Let's say we're getting towards the end of the lunar cycle that began with the eclipse of the 29th of March. And so we're in a smaller lunar cycle, which always happens over the course of about roughly 28, 29 days, 29 and 1/4 days, technically, I think. And so here we are at the third quarter part of that lunar phase. And in that third quarter phase, we have a T-square. That's actually part of the Mars opposition to Pluto that is building, that will be exact on the 26th, but is also very much in play all of the week before the new moon in Taurus. The sun itself, having just moved into Taurus, is at 1 degree 12 minutes. Mars is at 1 degree 12 minutes of Leo, and the moon is at 1 degree 12 minutes of Aquarius, just very close, just over 2 degrees of a conjunction with Pluto, which means a few hours later, just a couple of hours later, in fact, it will join up with Pluto. So that's an interesting dynamic because it's almost like saying what we understood at the eclipse, this new cycle that was going from the end of March, so the 29th of March of this year, has been expressed in terms of our awareness or our understanding of what we need to take action on the 13th of April when we had the full moon in Libra. And remember that full moon was taking place at 23 degrees of the opposition between Libra and Aries. And so at 23 degrees of Aries, we had the sun with Chiron. Chiron is basically at the same place. It's moving very slowly, and as it does. And so the moon was at 23-ish of Libra. So this is already something that came into our awareness, something more clear about what we need to do based on this smaller cycle of the eclipse that started the cycle, the lunation cycle on the 29th of March. And now we're at the third quarter phase. So now we're at the phase where we're thinking, okay, based on what I understood, what came into my awareness at that 13th of April juncture, I now see what I need to do. And because we have built into this realization, which is always the realization, it's this change moment. The third quarter moon is about something that we're shedding. It's based on this awareness, we're moving in a new direction now to let go, finally release the thing that needs to be released so we can begin again at the new moon cycle, which we'll talk about in a moment, based on the 27th of April new moon. So this is a lot of fixed energy, but it doesn't mean that things won't change because the fixed energy is involving Pluto and Mars as well as the moon. And so the moon itself is the most rapid moving object through the sky. And Mars, of course, is picking up speed. It's not very fast at this point, but it's picking up speed after its retrograde cycle. And it's also in a fixed sign, but it's also more fiery in a fire sign like Leo. And the sun itself is in Taurus. And perhaps, again, because it's fire, because it's sun, it's a fiery planet in an otherwise earthbound fixed energy, it feels maybe that things are not really happening the way we want them to, but things are changing. And it's almost kind of like things are changing, and it's like as if you're sitting at the train station and you're thinking, yeah, my train's leaving very soon. It'll leave any minute now. But then all of a sudden you realize the train is starting to move. I don't know how many of you take trains, but I've had that experience, and it's pretty terrifying because you realize that you've been sitting there waiting for the train to leave the station, and you were meantime on the bench, and all the while the train was preparing to leave. So it's time now to really start to see that the train is leaving the station. And the fact that things don't seem to be moving quickly at this point is not, it's the appearance of things. It's not the reality. Things are moving extremely quickly. It's just that the energy of resistance to the change is as strong as the desire for change. So when there's energy for change, like with a T-square, where change is necessary, it's absolutely a part of what has to take shape. In a fixed energy, we know that things have to change in a dramatic way. There's a big shift for change, and there's a certain inertia, an opposition to the change, or even a disbelief. Like, I'm sitting on the bench, and is that train actually moving? Is that my train? Is that my train? And this is the moment that we have to wake ourselves up to. So if we go back in time, this phase, this cycle is also tied to a bunch of lunar cycles that I want to mention in the last couple of years, because I think, again, it can help us to tie in events that have already happened and see how these events then take us forward into the future. Before I do that, I'm actually recording this on the 20th of April. On the 20th of April, we have a really strong tie-in with Venus, Saturn, and the North Node. The 21st, it becomes almost perfected, as Saturn is now at 2648, and the North Node is at 2650. And you'll see as we look at the chart for the new moon in Taurus that Venus will actually have moved through them during the course of the week. Venus then picks up a little bit of speed and moves through the conjunction with Saturn, through the conjunction to the North Node, and comes out the other side to almost leave Pisces. So Venus is exalted, and all through this dynamic, we have an exalted Venus to support the Sun and Uranus in the fifth house, or sorry, in the house where Taurus is, because she rules Taurus from her exaltation sign, which is Pisces. So there's something really interesting about this as well, because the moon, which is gathering up this urge to change, with Pluto, which is really compulsive or based on something that is we're becoming aware, let's say, of inner hidden dynamics, hidden motivations, hidden fears. And then the moon gathers up speed as it goes to take the last quarter to get to the new moon phase. And that is where the moon is going to pass through Venus, Saturn, and North Node by conjunction. It will have to take information again from Neptune, Mercury, Chiron, and Aries. Then it reaches the sun. And so you can think of this moment in time as recognizing that there's a thing that needs to be done. And the action for change is important. And it's about letting go as much as it is about starting something new. This phase is really a good time to release as much as you can, release old ideas, release especially fixed opinions or the feeling that you already know. It's part of the challenge of the fixity of the signs to have a sense that I already know and I don't need to question, especially with the Mars. In Leo, there can be a sense of I know what I need to do and I'm going to do it, where the questioning is important. The other challenge with that is that Mercury, the planet that allows us to reflect on things and think about things and communicate about things, is ruled by this Mars. And Mercury in the Mars ruled sign like Aries is extremely impulsive. And so again, we have this urge to change, an urge to do something, but it's not yet there. It's not yet happening. The train is only slowly moving, and we know we need to get on it, but we don't know quite yet how we can get on it. And if we keep that analogy of shedding stuff, it's like leave the bags behind and get on the damn train and let it take you in the new to the new destination. And so here what we have also is the Mercury-Neptune conjunction in a sextile to the Pluto and Moon conjunction. So there's something here in the awareness, but that is also tying into a new vision or a new way of communicating about the vision or a new way of understanding what's going on. Moon Pluto is intense. It comes from deep down. It's a psychological thing. And then that also reflects open, sort of communities, like the moon represents the people, and the public in general. And then, of course, Pluto represents that urge that's coming from below the surface. It's coming from underneath, or it's coming, that Pluto representing power, and the influence of power can also be literally like mob power, the power of the crowd, the power of the collective. And in opposition to Mars, we can find ourselves getting caught up in ideas that might be collective ideas, or maybe things that everybody else is caught up in, and we want to keep going in the direction that everybody else seems to be going confidently towards. But with the Neptune and Mercury, we may not be getting the information we need to know that we're going in the right or wrong direction. So again, there's this tension at this time. The change is palpable. I really want this thing to be done this way. I want this result. I want this to change. But we're not fully certain what the facts are, the lay of the land. And it's an old story because we've been grappling with this for years. The sun itself is in Taurus, again, for a cycle. The sun just entered into Taurus on the overnight from the 19th to the 20th of April. And that sun in Taurus is really showing us the area of life where we focus on our values and what sustains us and what is really important in terms of security, emotional security, sort of financial security, food security, land, all of those things that nurture and nourish us. That's Taurus. So money markets, finance, people, in terms of our friendships and the collective support that we might get from people who share our ideas, that's also Taurian. Where's my stuff? What are my possessions? What are my belongings? Well, that's part of the dynamic that is requiring some change. What am I willing to let go of? What am I willing to look at differently? In terms of this new moon that's coming up, it can be, where do I rely overly, perhaps too much, on the material stuff of life to make me feel secure? And where do I need to start to let go of some of that and realize that my security is interior? It's an inner experience. And this is where we come back to the exaltation ruler of Taurus, which is Venus with Saturn and the North Node. It's really getting that sense of my security is portable. It is who I am. I have the inner security of faith. I have the inner security of knowing, and that sense of my clarity around my values and what I find most important. So that Venus-Saturn and that Rahu conjunction, it's a really rare and unusual conjunction. And just actually a few days ago, if we go to the middle of, I think it was the 16th of April, so just after the full moon, and before I'm doing this video, we had Mercury along there with Venus, Saturn, and the North Node. So it's been a big story around this new thing that we want to establish in a more, let's say, lasting way. I've spoken about this in other videos. And yet there's also the pressure for change coming from the sextile to Uranus, which is all about change. And Uranus is in Taurus, which is very much about the resistance to change and the need for security. We haven't had that really since 2018 collectively. I did in my recent video, I talked a lot about the move towards totalitarianism, and this is a feature. This is the times that we're living in. These fascist tendencies that we're seeing that have grown throughout the world. Some of them with a prettier face, again, in depending on the government and the ruler at the helm. This has been building for many, many, many years, and it's something that we have to become aware of, because if we blame one person, we're not seeing how it all happens. Don't forget that Hitler was elected. Hitler was chosen by the people. He didn't rock up and steal power. So power takes control insidiously in ways that are confusing to people. And this is part of the dynamic here that's happening with the Neptune and Mercury, where Mercury is exactly sextiling Pluto. And there can be a confusion around what's true because it's also clouded by the conjunction with Neptune. There's also, of course, the outright lying that goes on, and that's something to know. These two planets are also in a trine to Mars. So there's something here that we might act on and do coming from a place of good faith, thinking we know what's true, but not really being sure. Now, if we come from that if we take that action or we do that thing coming from a place of our higher values or our higher intuition, that can actually be really helpful. It's not to say that this is all bad. It's just to say that we should always hold the potential for things to be a little different to how we're perceiving them, and even in some cases the entire opposite to what we're perceiving. Like even now, in the Wall Street Journal, there was an article about the tariffs that are imposed by the Trump administration on China. And there's been an admission that it's not about tariffs. It's certainly not about protecting American industry. And of course, that's what people are told so that they would feel good about what's going on. But it's 100% about isolating China. And the problem is that this is backfiring in a terrible way. Now, again, I get hate in the comments if I just even mention, like last time, I mentioned leaders without even mentioning a name. And if your leader can't be criticized, you're in a cult. So I will remove your comments if you curse, if you insult me, if you rage at me. Go take your rage out at the leader who's disappointed you. I've told you now for years that we're in a phase where we have to save ourselves. We can't wait for others to save us. So least of all the leaders that we have right now. So that's just one example of many where what you're being told or what everybody's getting excited about is not actually what's happening. And now we can go down the path of what different wars and genocides are going on in the world. I won't go there because, again, I have to go through the comments and it's really at times quite painful. So I just don't want to go there. That's why I'm just doing this kind of astrology now. But you go and listen and research and observe what's going on, and then be holding that space for, is this true? Do I know this true? This is true. Did I see a post on Instagram, or have I actually learned something about what's going on here? And do I have a context for that? So anyway, all of this to say that we're living in a time where this cycle is bringing up an intensity. It's like this crescendo that's building. We're not there yet. We're in the building of the crescendo. And the crescendo will be that new moon, where the new moon is releasing something that, again, was built on what was happening starting at the eclipse and what we've been experiencing, a bit like a pressure cooker now ever since. This triple conjunction is a part of that. This is it's incredibly rare, radical change. And what I'd like to say, because sometimes in the comments people say, well, I don't, nothing's happening. It's not really affecting me. I have all these points at this place and that place in my chart. And I have to say that the most likely place where you're going to see results in a really obvious and effective way in your life is if you have a conjunction to these placements that I'm talking about. If you have conjunctions to any of these important things, for example, with the opposition from Mars to Pluto, that will be around 3 degrees. I've done a video about that. You can watch that one. I think it was the last upload, maybe. Recently, anyway, in mid-April, I've done a video about that. And that, 3-degree margin, you can give it 3 degrees on either side, meaning 6 degrees and all the way back to the first degree of Leo is going to be really, really important, and equally of Aquarius, because Pluto is there. That opposition is carrying a lot of weight. Now, to a slightly lesser extent, you might find that also very important for Taurus, simply because the opposition of Pluto and Mars is quite intense and very rare. And the fact that the planets that are in the T-square are fast-moving planets, like the Sun and the Moon, they're triggering the opposition. They're creating some kind of impetus for change, which you may or may not feel. But anyway, if you have a conjunction to any of that in the first 6 degrees of Taurus, that will certainly apply. And I'll repeat this when we look at the Moon. But again, for the Pisces, for example, if you have things, and in the last decan of Pisces, I've said this before, basically the last 10 degrees of Pisces, your life is changing quite radically. And if you have something in the last, say, 5 or 6 degrees of Pisces, it's even more so. It's guaranteed. The same applies to roughly the first 10 or 12 degrees of Aries. We could go up to 12 because of the Venus retrograde. It's intense what's happening for Pisces and Aries. It may be experienced through other people if you go to the opposite degrees. For example, if you go to the first 10, 12 degrees of Libra, or the last 6 to 10 degrees of Virgo. I'm a little tired today, sorry. I'm doing this at the end of the day, which is never a good idea. So Virgo also can be affected by opposition, and to a lesser degree, the square as well. But again, the more direct the impact, and the square, by the way, coming from Gemini and Sagittarius, of those degrees of the last 10 degrees of those signs. The more you have a direct impact of a planet in conjunction, the more you can be sure that life is going to change in extraordinary ways. And I mentioned in an earlier video a while ago that there was an eclipse, and this eclipse included the Saturn. So Saturn, the Sun, the Moon, and the North Node happened to conjoin my descendant when I moved to Belgium. That's when I started working at the commission. That's when I met my future, now ex-husband. And the reason I'm saying this is because if that had just happened kind of randomly in my, say, 7th house, probably a lot of things would have changed in a certain way, but not as impactful as all of that. And what I also want to say is before going to Belgium, I was living in Prague before then. I'd lived in Prague for a few months in the 90s. And at that time, I had such a compulsion. It was not even under discussion. I had to move to Belgium, and I don't know why. Never ever visited Belgium. Nobody wants to move to Belgium. People want to move to Paris. Nobody wants to move to Belgium. You only go there for a job. Anyway, something in me was calling me to go there. It was very karmic. And this is the moment that we're in here with Saturn and the North Node, with Venus, previously with Mercury. There's something very karmic. And the closer it is to something happening in your chart, the more you're going to be affected, and especially affected in a major way. It's not just going to be, oh, that's interesting. It's going to be like, wow, I didn't see that coming. And so we have to hold the space also for what we don't know that we don't know. And this is, of course, part of that moment. So it would be quite silly or difficult, at the very least, to predict what's actually going to happen, because what has to happen will happen. Saturn and the North Node are both very karmic. The North Node is about expanding something almost to the point of obsession. And I did mention that notion of being obsessed around the idea of going to Belgium, believe it or not. And so the whole story around the North Node and Saturn conjunction is to bring this new thing in a way that is going to be different. It's completely open to transformation. And this is also a part of the dynamic that we're in with the eclipses, and also with this unusual, relatively rare opposition between Mars and Pluto that is also engaging in a T-square in the whole week before we have this new moon. So big times, and big times call for big change. So think in terms of, what can I be without? What can I live without? What can I release? What can I give away to support others? That's also Taurus. It's about abundance and about generosity of spirit. Same thing with Venus in Pisces, that generosity of spirit. This is a time where we want to live in that way. We have to be more generous with each other. We have to be more there, let's say, with each other, in a sense that, if if we're struggling to keep our stuff when our neighbors are starving, we're setting ourselves up for more misery. So we think that it'll make us more secure, but we see that on a macro level with all these billionaires scrambling to hold as much stuff as they can and have life molded in their based on their desires, while the rest of the world is burning. And one day or another, they're going to figure out that they're part of this world that's burning and that they actually are making themselves extremely vulnerable. Right. So there we are. I want to show up now the Taurus new moon, and we'll just come to that. And the new moon, as I mentioned, is at 7 degrees, almost 8 degrees. So it's 7 degrees, 46 minutes of Taurus. And the T-square is by degree, so it's quite broad at this point because with the new moon we've got now Mars at 4 degrees, so there's almost 4 degrees of a square, which is still a very tight square, and almost 4 degrees here, meaning that there's again, a little bit more than 4 degrees of a square with Pluto. So the Pluto opposition to Mars holds for the rest of April. It's a very strong opposition for a few more days to come. And so this new moon again is this now end of the cycle that we just started with the 29th of March eclipse. That's that mini lunar cycle. But I want to bring your attention to the prior cycles, where just as I did with the eclipse, you'll see that in the eclipse video and in the full moon video, there are lunar families, lunar cycles that we can look back on. So on the one smaller scale, we have the lunation that has just happened, and that's in the little cycle that we're in. Then on a bigger scale, we have the lunations that happen around the same degrees, and then they creep backwards every period of time, every few months through the quarter moon, the full moon, the third quarter moon, and then the full moon again, or the new moon again. They creep forward about 2 degrees each time. So let me give you some dates here if you want to take note of these things. So this is the third quarter moon, as I mentioned, following on from Libra. And if we go to the solar eclipse, now this is not the recent solar eclipse. This is the previous cycle. So we had an early cycle, just the last solar eclipse was in the Aries Libra axis to finish that up, even if the nodes were in the Pisces and Virgo axis. The solar eclipse that this moon refers to was in 2022. So that was a Taurus solar eclipse at 10 degrees, 28 minutes on the 30th of April, 2022. So we're looking at 3 years back. And here we're getting a resonance with that. So then we had from that eclipse of 30th of April 2022, which was at the time when we still had the axes, the lunar nodes in the axis of Taurus and Scorpio, the full moon, so the full moon lunar eclipse of the 28th of October 2023 was the full moon based on that earlier April 30th, 2022 new moon. So that was part of that cycle. And now we're getting to the closure of the full moon cycle of 2023, October 28th, which was at 5 degrees and 9 minutes of Taurus. So you can note those dates down. It was the 30th of April 2022, and then the 28th of October 2023. And now this is the end of that cycle, meaning the start of a new one. And that new cycle is going to be in our awareness then each quarter as we go forward, 6 months at a time. So we're going to see this, just like we'll see the results of the eclipse of the 29th of March, the first quarter results we'll see on the 27th of December, 2025. Then we're going to see the first quarter here on the 26th of January, 2026. All right, so what's going on today is a result of everything that has gone on today, meaning the new moon of the 7th, which is on the 27th of April, just to clarify, 27th of April, and it's 2030 Universal Time. Again, I use Universal Time because you're from all over the place, and that you have to just calculate by adding or subtracting according to where you live. And And so this story is the beginning of something that we're going to create, recreate, now move into towards 2027. So this is a long journey of going forward in time. So we'll get the first quarter um, sort of crisis. It's a crisis of consciousness. That's part of the way of describing the first quarter of any phase. And that crisis of consciousness, awareness, the crisis of, oh my gosh, this is what's really going on. What do we do about this? That's January in 2026, on the 26th of January. I think that's Australia Day, isn't it? And I think that's also it's the Indian National Republic Day. So there you go. Enjoy all of that, folks. That'll be your first quarter based on here. So that is going to be at 6 degrees, 14 minutes of Taurus. And then we get the culmination, which is the full moon from this new moon, which will come on the 26th of October, 2026. And that's at 2 degrees, 45 minutes. And then again, another cycle, 2 cycles later, we're going to get then the new cycle that begins. So you can look at all of those dates, and it helps if you want to plan where I'm going to show you in your chart where it's all going to show up by ascendant and sun and moon. And you can plan ahead. So what you're starting now is going to have an impact in January of next year, or you're going to start to see something that you might need to adjust, that you might need to change, you might need to discard, you might need to realize I didn't invest enough, I need to put more in, or I put too much of myself into that, I need to take some back, I need to do things differently. So the Taurus area of your life is where we're going to see these results, okay, in all of these lunations. The other thing that's interesting around the time of the new moon, which does represent everything spring and summer in the northern hemisphere, it's this very new energy of growth and vibration of abundance, and that's why, for example, it's the exalted moon. When the moon is in Taurus, it's exalted because Taurus is all about what's generous and what's full of life, and the moon represents those things. It represents abundance and beauty in the terms of the sort of luminosity, and it does also represent our sense of connection to the mother as well, including Gaia, the Mother Earth. Um, and also at the moon, at the new moon, we have Venus in her sign of exaltation, almost ready to leave. So Venus is just a degree and a half away from the end of Pisces, very, very close to conjunction with Neptune. She'll be meeting Neptune just a couple of days after this lunation. And by that time, we move into Beltane. And Beltane is the cross-quarter day that is the halfway point between the equinox cycles. So we're going from the equinox of the March cycle to the equinox of the September cycle. I'm just saying that because of the northern southern hemisphere thing. And Venus is again this in exaltation, with the moon in exaltation, Venus ruling the moon, and Venus herself being in strong, strong dignity, really talks a lot about the idealized or the best possible intention, best possible promise, let's say, of the energy of these signs. Now, the important thing to understand is that exaltation doesn't mean you get good stuff. It doesn't mean that it's all going to work out. And often people will say, is it going to be good or is it going to be bad? And I'd like to remind you, there's no such thing as good or bad, really. Because what is good and what is bad, the outcomes that can sometimes be the most challenging are actually the most fruitful and the most engaging for personal growth and for things to happen in ways that are mysterious and absolutely unexpected. And sometimes when we wish for something and we get the outcome, we kind of regret it. It's like, I wish I hadn't asked for that. I wish I hadn't wanted that, because it didn't turn out the way I thought it would. It doesn't make me feel secure or happy. And so we want to understand that good or bad is just an idea coming from an insecurity about safety. So when you're worried about if something is good or bad, come back to the fundamental notion of this moment in time, which is to find your inner security, to find your place of security deep inside yourself, deep inside your connection to spirit, to the universe, dare I say God, or whatever you describe as such. And this is the real essence of the Venus in Pisces. It's to be connected to the all that is in a way that's harmonious and connected to what is abundant and beautiful. So the fact that those planets, Venus and the Moon, are exalted, generally very happy, is helpful at this time. But it also means that that is peak, the necessary place to put our awareness and energy as we go through the underlying difficulty of these times, because we can't get away from that Mars opposite Pluto, and we can't get away from the unsettled energy that is this North Node with Saturn and Venus. Even if it holds a promise for something to change in a big scale, change is change, and it can be very confronting. There's a really wonderful thing. It was, I think Louise Hay said, "It's only change. I'm safe." It's a very interesting way of looking at things, because often what happens is people get hooked on the outer dimension of what's changing, and they're so afraid, and that's very Pluto, by the way. They're so inwardly upset or unconsciously upset about something that rocks their boat that they don't realize that it's okay, that change is necessary. You know, if you don't have compost, you don't have the flowers or the fruit or whatever you're harvesting. The change is necessary. Imagine if you never took the rubbish out of your kitchen, you wouldn't survive more than a couple of months. It's just unsustainable. So change is necessary. And we have to then use that energy of the last week, this third quarter moon energy that is all through this week leading up to the new moon here in Taurus on the 27th, and use that time to really consciously say, what can I let go of? What can I strip to the bare minimum? What can I give away to people who have less than me or who have more need at this time than I do? And by making the people around me in community, that's also the Pluto in Aquarius, by changing my relationship to the people around me, making people more secure, more comfortable, I am also going to be more secure and more comfortable. We have this crazy notion that we have to be clinging on to things, and that also is one of the drawbacks of the fixed energy, and particularly the sign of Taurus, where there can be this tendency to want to hoard and want to hold on to things and not let things circulate. And this is a moment in time where we have to see that things are going to circulate, whether we like it or not. So we might as well be conscious about how they do that, how things are moving in and out of our, whether it's our physical home or our bank account or our possession. And can we let go of more and more of that? The Venus-Saturn North Node is another way of saying this this whole ride has an ending. There is an ultimate experience to the human experience. Then we re-merge with the ethereal or the spirit realm or the cosmic realms. And so this limited experience, this limited sort of play of the universe is time bound, and that's Saturn. So we can bring that to our awareness at this time. So Easter is also around this time. So I'm speaking to you here now on Easter Sunday. So if you're celebrating Easter, then happy Easter. And it also, of course, it carries that energy that I'm describing here of this whole week, this pretty much the last week of April, which is about rebirth. And it's about that generous, abundant nature that we rely so heavily on. And it's also about the desire for things to be new. So if you look into nature, all the leaves that sprout, all of the buds on the trees, the bud has to drop to create the fruit. The bud has to, go through a period of an ugly phase where first there's this beautiful little blossom, and then all of a sudden it goes brown and mushy and drops, but behind that is the fruit. Behind that are the berries or the apples or the whatever it is that the tree is fruiting. So we're really in this phase now where we have to become quite clear of our fundamental fragility. And in this particular time, Uranus is part of our maybe greatest teaching around that, because Uranus is in this unusual dynamic. It's holding a sextile to the North Node and Saturn with Venus all through this time. So that is really where change is necessary. There's a kind of a sense of the resistance to the change and also the knowing it's the best thing to do. So you can try and find where you are on that polarity of the resistance to the knowing. And it can help even if you just literally write things down and try and make a note of where am I resisting change and where do I know it has to happen? And what am I most afraid of? What am I afraid of losing? What am I afraid of sacrificing? And why, what am I doing that is keeping me stuck in misery? And sometimes I get comments also where people are talking about things not changing, nothing happened, nothing did. But we can't live life that way. We can't be on the receiving end of life. Being a taker all through life is extremely dull. This is in the Indian tradition, it's known as tamas. It's dullness, and it's dull in the sense of the energy, but also the mind. The mind needs to be energized and to create some new inspiration, to create a new dynamic. Otherwise, you end up being battered around and you relate more and more and more to being a victim of life itself rather than a participant of life itself. If you look at any toddler, the average toddler, unless there's something unfortunate, dysfunctional with the child, they they engage voluntarily in everything. They engage fully in their learning curve. They engage fully in discovering everything, sometimes to the to the dismay of their parents. They stick their hands in everything. They run around and do things that are just experimental. And we lose that bit by bit when we start to doubt our validity or our capacity to enjoy life. But when we start to realize, well, we have to engage to be able to get that. This is the moment. It's, I would say, if you listen again to my Mars opposite Pluto video, I speak a lot about that. This is the time. And, do put music on that gets you up and moving around. I'll write a list of the songs that I listen to when I need that boost. If the boost is hard to find, if the creativity is hard to find, or the energy seems to be stuck, then you have to move your body, and you can do that quickly and most in the way that most uplifts you, most brings your vibration up through music. That's visceral. We are a vibratory energy. So this is the time to create your playlist that gets you up off the couch, that gets you shifting your energy, that gets you in a new phase, in a new area of creativity. Right, let's have a look sign by sign, and we see how all of this shapes up for everybody. Now, what do I do? Do I go forward or do I go backwards? Let's see if I can go backwards and catch Aries on the ascendant, just to avoid my personal confusion. Will I lose the moon? I think I will. Yep. Okay, so what I'll do is go forward and see. It's just easier for my little brain cells to hold the notion if the moon and the sun are in the same house. So we're going to put Aries on the ascendant, and by now the moon has long passed. So we've got to go minutes back, because there we go. Hang on. Aries. There we go. All right, so now we have Aries on the ascendant, and this is for Aries, sun, moon, and rising. So keep in mind that the new moon in Taurus is on the 27th, not the 28th, but here we are just because of that dynamic. Right, so Aries, you have this new moon in your house of money. It relates to all of your possessions. So what I was describing here is quite literal for you. It's quite important in terms of what how you manage your money, how you manage your belongings, your sense of values, what you value, and all the idea that you have around your security or your possessions and your income, and perhaps also your investment portfolio, for example, all that stuff. It also responds to the notion of what supports you in general. This can be your diet, for example, what you eat. It can be the family that surrounds you. The notion of being supported in life is part of the second house in general, and especially for Aries with Taurus on the second house, and now with this new moon, it's a good time to really reflect on what's actually working for me. Where do I have support? Where do I have a need to create a new relationship to what I value, my own resources, my own capacity to use myself as a resource as well. So this is a really good time to be very clear about money, about what's available to you, about what needs to be asked for. Perhaps there's a request that's at this point necessary. You need to reach out for more help, or reach out in some way to be more clear about how you're investing, or how you're using your money, or how you want to change your income. Pluto is in your house of gains as well. It's also the house of friends and relationship to society and the way that you feel about your future. So all of that is tied in as well. Pluto is changing all of that. It's requiring a sort of a root and branch reform around all of those notions. And then your ruler Mars is in the fifth house opposite that Pluto, creating this T-square with your second house. And Mars in the fifth house is quite charged with new initiatives and inspiration, and a desire to perhaps invest in a new way or take a risk in some way, because that's the energy of Mars and the energy of the fifth house, and that's your ruler. So in your way, how do you want to take a risk? There's something changing in the way that you relate to yourself anyway. And this has been very much part of the bigger story for the last couple of years, and most especially since the beginning of 2025, because you've been very much embroiled in this whole story of change. You also have the ruler of your second house, Venus, in your 12th house. She's with Saturn and the North Node. So here there's a number of different ways that this can show up. And that one of those, the most obvious of which, is your spiritual belief system. What do I hold to be my support in terms of my spiritual guidance or support? Where can I feel like I'm relaxed because I know this is there for me? And this can also call in issues around recognizing patterns that you are undergoing, or patterns of behavior that become perhaps unsustainable or unhelpful. Now you know this is the time to change all of that. It becomes really obvious. This has been part of the dynamic of the Venus and Mercury retrogrades, and it's also part of the dynamic of the Saturn and Neptune crossing back and forth between your seventh and your first. And the Rahu is similar, or the North Node is similar to the 12th house, in that it also resembles, or is symbolic of foreigners and people from away, from wherever, from far away. And so here there might be something calling you from people or ideas or places that you may know or don't know, that you're wanting to go to. And especially if you have planets in these areas, this will be all the more strong. But the notion of travel, going far away, or even going deeper into yourself, going into retreat, going into a place where you start to realize, I've been too much out in the world. This can be very much an issue with fire signs, that there's so much constant go, go, go and activity that it's sometimes necessary to remind yourself to actually pull back and do less. Certainly your everyday life is under scrutiny in terms of what you need to let go, in terms of how you relate to your everyday life, your schedule, your job, and the things that go with that. The sort of schedule that goes with that, maybe also with reference to health. There's something that you're becoming more and more aware of around what keeps you healthy and what you need to maintain your health. Now, Saturn rules your house of career and your 11th house as well. And so this can also be something new that is about career, that's tied to foreign lands and going away. Right. Okay, so Aries, I'll leave it there. And in the meantime, I'm going to let the dog out because she's decided it's time. And I'll be right back for Taurus. Okay, now we have Taurus on the ascendant, so Taurus Sun, Moon, or ascendant. And of course, this is your new moon, and you get usually one a year, sometimes two if you're lucky. But we have this new moon in Taurus now telling you something about yourself that you want to change or want to begin again, something about a priority for yourself or a way of being in life, a way of engaging, let's say, in life. And especially if this is your ascendant, if it's your moon, it might be related to your home or your emotional life, the way you feel about life, the way you feel about somebody, and the way you feel about your security overall. And if it's your sun, it can be with relationship to your career or men in general, or a father figure, or your sense of purpose. Either way, it's very big change because we're looking at something from your 10th house, where Pluto is, to your 4th house of home and your feeling of security and groundedness, where Mars is. So this new thing is partly about this story of career change or home change, or a pattern of relating to your parents, your ancestors, the people that you come from, let's say, or even the land that you come from. And this is a very big story for you right now that is already underway, but it's definitely kicking off a new chapter, a very important long-term chapter based on, listen to the introduction, based on what happened already in uh, April 30th. I think it was it April 30th? Let me check that again, because this is important for you. The Taurus solar eclipse of the 30th of April 2022 is part of this story. So we're looking 3 years back. So you can go through that in a very personal way. What was I doing? How was I feeling? Where was I? How did I want to work, etc. And really start to understand how this is a new place for you. Venus, which is your ruler, is in the 11th house of gains and society, and how you connect with people in a social way or in a friendly way, or how you connect with your future. And especially because North Node is there with Saturn, there's something very different. It's a new, let's say, imprint on a new vision for the future, or a new vision for how you reach out into relationships with friends and groups that connect with you on an ideological level, whether it's spiritual or political, or you know, your knitting group, whatever. This is a really important time to reflect on that as well. How do I see my future? How do I want to go forward? So Jupiter is in your house of money at the same time, ruling that 11th house where Venus is. So there's a lot of thought around security, unsurprisingly, because that's a sort of a preoccupation with Taurus, whether it be emotional or financial security. It's part of the bigger picture for a Taurus. So here's where you can start to look at that new energy of Neptune and Saturn, which I'll do in a separate video, but the energy of that Neptune-Saturn coming into your 12th house can also reconnect you to what you believe in terms of spirit, what you believe in terms of your deeper connection to yourself through your unconscious, or through patterns of self-undoing, things that you're not doing well for yourself and that actually are causing insecurity in your life, where it's based on resistance to change, potentially. Now, you've got Uranus going through your first house, so you will not have been able to resist change on every level, but it's important to recognize that there's something that is even more favorable when change is conscious, when you go through that process and say, I really finally have to give this up. I need to let go of this. Perhaps part of the discussion is in your mind, at least, or perhaps in your social context, around your social status, your marital status, or your employment status, your ambition, for example, your way of showing up in terms of a career, how you want to be recognized, and all of those different things. You can also hear more about that with the Mars-Pluto opposition video. Yeah, so big times for Taurus, and this is definitely a video that you want to listen to the introductory message for, because it also is very personal to you in so many ways. So good luck with that, Taurus. I'll speak to you in the next video. So we have Gemini on, yes, Gemini. I thought I said Jupiter because I've been doing that every time. First time I got it right, and then I stopped myself. So we got Jupiter in Gemini, for Gemini, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, but this new moon is happening in your 12th house. And so that again is with reference to something that is maybe a little bit beyond your understanding. It may be unconscious, or it may be something that is going on behind the scenes that you're starting, that is especially based in security. The 12th house can actually be something to do with loss or letting go. And this can be a new cycle around what you're ready to let go, what you consciously are willing to let go of. When it's a reference to loss, it may be things that you materially lose. It can be financial loss, or it can be a loss of people in your life, and that can be in so many different ways. I would need to see your natal chart to see how that would be described, but these things are part of life itself, and so there's something in your realization and your awareness that's based on something that has been underway for 3 years already, and now we're starting it again. There's a new cycle. It's fresh and it's really different because Venus, which is ruling this 12th house, is up in your 10th house of your sense of your aims and your the vision that you hold for the future, or the thing that you want to do going forward. And Venus is with Saturn and the North Node, making something quite long lasting, life changing in that 10th house. It can also refer to parents. It can be something to do with authority figures of all kinds, or yourself in the role of an authority figure. Your ruler Mercury is in the 11th house of gains, and that also represents friends and the future in general, your vision for the future. So this is all tying all of that together. Mars is in your 3rd house of siblings, and that might also involve some relationships to siblings or extended family, cousins and uncles and things like that. That can be part of this bigger dynamic. But nonetheless, you know that you're on the road to something really different and really big that's happening in this moment. So really think deliberately, think very clearly, what do I want to start? Especially for you, it's a personal investment in how you want to be seen in society, how you want to leave a mark, how you want to be acknowledged, or how you want to start to take more responsibility, perhaps in the world outside, or in your family, potentially. So this is quite an important step, even though it's a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit off the radar. It often is those things that are seeding behind the scenes that actually have the most impact, because they're so profound. And so don't dismiss this as something that's not really important to you, Gemini. The 12th house is a very important place. It's the place where so much happens that drives our way of being. It's like the operating system behind the device. And this is currently now asking for a reboot. So upgrade your operating system, and from that basis, then go forward and listen to the introduction as well about the cycles of the moon, and see if that resonates with you. All right, Gemini, I'll see you in the next video. And Cancer, this is, of course, always important because the moon rules Cancer. So for Cancer, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant, this is happening in your 11th house of gains and your future and friends and the groups that you participate with. Quite an important dynamic, because there's something here that can take you forward into a new vision, a new future. If you go back to that April 30th, 2022, you'll see that something that started then, something that was extremely powerful then, is showing its cycle has completed fully, and now we're moving into a new cycle, and that cycle goes forward in time. In my case, for example, because I have the ascendant and the moon in Cancer, I actually started uploading videos about that time to YouTube. I had been like a consumer of videos on YouTube, so I'd had my channel for ages, but it was in fact that spring, which I think it was in fact April, unconsciously I'd started doing it. Although sometimes I time things specifically, but that was just because it happened to be the time that I had something I thought I should probably put on the tubes, and that's when the cycle started. And now what I'm doing is starting to revise how I work, and part of that revision of how I work, for example, how I work, is partly the Venusian quality here, which is going to take me towards more teaching, which is also part of my nature anyway. It's part of what I do mostly throughout my life. And this is just a description of one way of understanding that cycle. So this 3-year cycle has brought us here. There's a new cycle coming, and it's based on something to do with the 9th house of a new sense of purpose, and it's a long-lasting purpose. It's a purpose that takes us from, there's a vision of something that matters. It's a higher level of purpose. It's not just income. It's not based on income. It's coming with a sense of personal involvement in that. And Jupiter, which is ruling the 9th, is in the 12th house of faraway lands, foreigners, distant places, people who come from far away. The 11th house is the audience, as it were. It's the internet. It's the people who watch and observe. And so there's something that comes through that faraway, distant place, the connection with what is far away, that is very loud here. Equally, something to do with writing or teaching in a more general sense can also be part of this, or at the very least, an understanding, especially as Mars is in the 2nd house, Pluto is in the 8th house, an understanding of how money is earned. Mars rules the 10th house for Cancer, the career, the vocation, the way that we show up out in the world outside the front door, and particularly strongly related to career ambition or aims, higher aims in life, the legacy perhaps that we want to leave. And that Mars in the 2nd says, I'm doing this thing based on my values, but also potentially based on a new source of income or a new need for income. And this is again the new moon, creating a new potential for a source of income. With Pluto in the 8th opposite that Mars, that's again what comes from other people. There may be an awareness of what is received from other people. The 8th house can be money that comes through inheritance or other people through marriage, things that come through payoffs, royalties, things that are not like actual direct income. It's passive, or it's something that's coming through another person. That includes also a client, for example, what your clients bring, what your clients show, how your clients affect you. That's part of the dynamic here at the same time. And you're going to have Saturn moving from this moment in time where Venus, Saturn, and the North Node have been all this week leading up to the new moon, and the previous week with Mercury at the same time. They're all establishing this new sense of why you're here and how you want to take that forward. The 9th house can also be about new relationships in terms of a second marriage or other marriages after a first major marriage, or another life partner, and that life partner is coming perhaps through foreigners. That's also because the Rahu North Node and the 9th house also are about foreigners. So there's maybe part of this new thing that you're working towards or that you're experiencing is based on connection with foreigners in general. Now, Saturn rules the 8th house of marriage, 7th house of partnerships. So this is a great time to establish a longer term relationship in terms of business partners or a life partner or people who you want to cooperate with and work with to go forward in what you're personally wanting to achieve. There might be some realizations, inspirations. That's also the North Node in the conjunction with Saturn, Venus, around your values, around your sense of what is important, what needs to be done, what must be done. That's the Saturn. How must I take care of all of these different things that I want to achieve, or the goals that I have and the way that I want to reach out? What is the perhaps spiritual discipline that I need to apply? What is the training that I need to be more serious about, so I can get that qualification, or I can get to that place where I can be recognized as a figure of authority? Saturn moves into the 10th house, and that's also what that can resemble. Saturn is a bit edgy in Aries, so we'll talk about that in another video. But when Saturn moves into the 10th, that's the opportunity to take the information and the learning from the 9th and take it into the social circle. This is how I show up out in the social circle or in my career, for example. Right. Okay, Cancer. So this is a good time for you to think big and long term, based on why you feel you're here. So good luck, and I'll see you in the next video. Right, Leo, you are Sun, Moon, and Rising. You are now on the ascendant with Mars in your ascendant, or at least in your first solar or lunar house as well. And this is, I'm gladly offering you that Mars after a very long extended journey through Cancer, which is my ascendant, where my moon is as well. So you can take it. I'm delighted to give it to you. And this Mars is in opposition to Pluto. So that may be a bit frisky. That may be something that causes some kind of challenge or upset, especially if you have your ascendant sun or moon around the first 6 or 7 degrees of Leo. Now that would reflect back on the beginning of December. Let's say the first half of December. Actually, let's call it the last half of November and the first half of December. And this is a time that is coming to completion. There's something that's happening here that you now realize you need to take action on. And Pluto is in the house of the other, the business partner, the life partner, the way that you do relationships. So it can be theoretically, how do I do relationships? How do I need to assert myself? And this is a really good lesson right now. How do I stand up to what is unjust or unfair, or what is not good for me, let's say. And we have the nodal axis in your second and eighth house, which is an issue around the notion of what you have and what you share, the stuff that you own, the possessions that you have, and what you share. And we see with Saturn and Venus there in the eighth house that there's a strong dynamic around that kind of sharing, or that kind of division of property, or the way that that needs to take place. But the eighth house is a lot more than that. It's a lot about intimacy, and we can call that intimacy like sexual or emotional or psychological intimacy. It's being vulnerable with a person. And that eighth house is where so much action has been since January. That's the North Node moving in, and then the Venus, and then the Mercury, the Neptune, Saturn story. It's all happening there in your eighth and ninth house. So there's a whole new lesson in terms of how you expose yourself to others. I don't mean literally, but or maybe, but the way that you are engaging with others and how you're connecting to others. How can you bring your heart into it? So sometimes Leos have had damaged relationships, especially with the father, that makes it difficult to open the heart in that Leo way, in that way of generosity and sharing and abundant sort of just radiance of showing people how to be people. For example, that's a kind of a Leo quality, which is just like, hey, here I am, let me show you how to be you. And that can be damaged. And when Saturn goes through the eighth house, sometimes it can bring some need to heal that as well, a need to understand that, a need to realize where this work has to be done alone. Nobody else can kind of give it to you. And here we have this cycle, very, very strong new imprint of a cycle in that eighth house, which can also be around family drama, family stuff, family baggage, the stuff that you're carrying from family trauma, family secrets, and so on. Where the 12th house is kind of like what you inherit through the ancestors and through the family. The eighth house is what you're getting from the people around you, more on a psychological or a pragmatic, sort of practical way, again, including physicality or including financial support and so on. So here's something really new and different that is going to leave an imprint for a very long time. So a good time to reflect on all of this, because the new moon is in your 10th house of how you show up. That is about your, when I say show up, I mean socially, how you show up in life, how you seize life by the sort of brass ring, and you reach out into your aspirations, into your career aspirations or aims, life aims, how you want to be seen. The sun, of course, is your ruler. And so that is kind of like saying you in the 10th house. And with an exaltation ruler, Venus in the 8th house, there's an aspect of this that is coming from underground. It's coming from a little bit behind the scenes. It's not really overt. It's coming through what you need to do, the work you need to do behind the scenes on yourself and on relationships and on things like trust, for example, security, those kinds of issues. in order to start this new cycle in terms of how you show up in the world, how you show yourself in your career, for example, or the role that you take in terms of parenting or leadership or other types of roles that have that authority, quality of authority. So there's something new here that you're digging up from what is underneath. It can also, since we're here talking about astrology, this can also refer to occult stuff where there's a deep desire to learn more about the occult, and this can also be about the psychological stuff, the psychology, psychiatry, hypnosis, and all those things related to healing through the mind. And that's eighth house stuff as well. And here, where we have this new dynamic, it's something very new, and perhaps your deeper desire is to move into a career which is more related to those things, these more healing modalities, and related to the esoteric stuff of life. And so here we have a bigger story of your future, also because Jupiter in the 11th house of your future rules that eighth house. So what you're doing now is also something that you can bring out into the public domain, as it were, or maybe that might include internet and things like that. So think long term, think in terms of who am I? How do I need to change? How do I need to change my partners? And how does that affect how I show up and how I do my stuff? And now my dog is barking at me. I will leave it there. That was anyway all I needed to say, and I'll see you in the next video. All right, so Virgo, Sun, Moon, and Ascendant. You're on the Ascendant now, and we've got this new moon in Taurus in your ninth house. And the ninth house is a place of aspiration of life. What am I here for? Why am I here? What is life? What is life all about? What do I believe in? What do I have faith in? And this is a really extraordinary opportunity for you to start anew and have a sense that I know now why I'm here. I understand there's a greater purpose. Now, this doesn't mean you have to jump into it at this time, by the 28th of April or something. It's really to say that you are recognizing that, and this is the new start that's going to take you ahead in time that leads you towards something else. If we listen to the intro where I talk about the first quarter aspect of this, which is from in January 2026. So you're going to get some understanding around this dynamic of the new thing here that will allow you to slowly make the changes towards your bigger vision for yourself. Because this is a time of almost urgent change where there's something that is going to be different in terms of your everyday life. Pluto is changing that already for the last couple of years. And that lunation, in fact, took place before Pluto was in the sixth house. So Pluto was still in your fifth house of self-expression and love as well. We'll talk about that in a minute. And so there's something here where you already knew there's this urge, there's this thing you want, but then perhaps it happened that life just, happened and you had to take that job or you had to do that thing. So here we have this dynamic where the Pluto is acting as the agent of change in your day-to-day life, with the opposition from Mars, which is about where you recognize patterns of behavior that may not be sustainable or supportive or helpful, including from your own unconscious mind or habit energy or addictions or anything like that. And it can also be something to do with faraway lands, because the moon itself is happening in that ninth house of foreigners, foreign lands, and so on. And the 12th house represents that as well. And here we have Mars. So there may be something about, going away, going somewhere different. I would have to see your natal chart to see if anything like that is jumping out. Yeah, and then this bigger dynamic around the ninth house sense of self is an undertaking for a long future. So here we have the North Node, Saturn, and Venus, which is ruling your ninth house. Venus in really strong dignity if you're planning a relationship, and especially this if you have the last 10 degrees of Virgo or anything in the last 10 degrees of Pisces that's really standing out for you. This will be specifically about you in relationship or the dynamic of another person in your life. And it can be client related or business partnership related, for example. So this dynamic is very, very long lasting and can change your life. It's something that will move you to a completely different place in your career or in your relationship dynamic or in your social status. Jupiter, which rules your seventh house, which is ruling that Venus, ruling this moon, is in the 10th house of social status, and it has been since May 2024, and it continues to move through there in the last 10 degrees, which is a square to all of this activity there, on until the 9th of June, when it moves into your 11th house of gains and the future and the sense of now things are moving forward. So it's a time to think longer term, think big, and recognize the dream, recognize the thing that is there, and don't sell yourself short at this time. I would say it's definitely a time to recognize how the bigger urges in you, the stronger urges in you are really important to listen to right now. This is happening in a quadrant house, so the first and seventh house, where Jupiter is in the top of your chart, another quadrant house. So this dynamic is really powerful because that's the kind of backbone of your life, and it does change quite a lot. It's a strong urge for bigger change, not just smaller, maybe behind the scenes change like others might be having, but this is a bigger change that is going to be visible, that might again involve travel or moving to another place, another country. Yeah, I haven't been picking up on the Black Moon Lilith. I forgot to mention that, in fact, in the intro, but Black Moon Lilith is making this grand cross during the time of this new moon, and Black Moon Lilith in the grand cross energy is where we understand that we feel somehow not acknowledged or not seen, and there may be something that ties you in here in the way that you need to communicate differently. And it's often where we're a little frustrated. I like to say Black Moon Lilith is where we're pissed off, where things have not worked out or have not been visible. And so we gain courage by making that change, making that different, taking the step to correct, let's say, what's not okay. And in this case, it's in the third house of communication and willpower and your choice. So it suggests that this is part of the dynamic here, that this is where your results will help you out, where you make choices that are based on something that is more supportive, let's say, going forward, maybe more courageous, potentially something you need to say, or letting go of something in relation to your friends or your sense of your everyday experience around your neighborhood or the kind of dynamic around your local space. I'd have to see your natal chart to see how this pans out, but it's part of this bigger urge for change. So just notice that your mind and the feelings, the notions that you have around things can be based in frustration. That doesn't make them necessarily destructive, but it can make you feel motivated to change. Just make sure that it aligns with your deeper and higher, higher vision for your life. So this is not just random change for the moment. Think long term and make the decisions appropriately based on what you want to see longer term. Your ruler is in the eighth house, so there's something here about revelations around the unknown or secrets or things that are coming through other people. The awareness of other people, the connection or the capacity to integrate other people and discuss and relate and exchange around other people. And that can do something, it can be something to do with your marital status, your social status in general, your occupational status, your vocation, career, etc. So this might be one of the ways of describing that, since Mars is in your 12th, ruling that eighth house, it might, and also Mars ruling your third, can be like negotiations behind the scene, for example, for a new contract at work, or negotiation behind the scenes for a new position. You're in one job and you're moving towards another job, and you're looking for that job outside, and you're now negotiating that. So this could be part of that bigger growth potential. It's a really key time for you, Virgo. So I really wish you every success, and I'll see you in the next video. So Libra, this new moon is happening in your eighth house of marriage and intimacy, and the place where you feel in somebody else's arms or taken care of by somebody else. And it's ruled by Venus, who is your ruler, and she's in the sixth house, and she's with Saturn and the North Node. So it's something that you recognize is new and needs to be longer lasting. There's a sustainable new thing that is coming in through your everyday experience, which might involve a job specifically. This sixth house can be the kind of job. It's how you earn your money, not necessarily what makes you come alive. It's the sort of grind, let's say. It can be about how you're moving through obstacles and having a new solution to overcome obstacles, and how to relate to those challenges or those things that you need to do in a new way. And then, of course, with the new moon in the eighth, there can be something about money that is coming to you, or that you're aware of what you share, how you share that, and what needs to change about that. There's something here potentially around love that also involves your future, or involves what you're getting out of it. Let's say, what am I getting out of this relationship? Am I giving more than I'm getting? How does that work for me? That's also the Venus in the sixth, but also this Mars opposition with Pluto. I did go and look at that video if you haven't seen it already, because I did talk about this a bit already. That Mars in the 11th has you focused on your future, has you focused on what's next. How do I expand out into my future, into the vision that I have for my life? How do I maybe pare back certain relationships in a way that is actually better for me? And that also can come through specific relationships around your work or your health. What's good for my health? This would also be another way of looking at this time. Like, is my work also supporting my health, or is it deteriorating my health? Or is my everyday habits, my everyday routines, is that supporting my health, or is it not? Is this something to do with family? So we have Black Moon Lilith in a grand fixed cross that involves this dynamic with the new moon, Mars, and Pluto, all in tight oppositions that are creating a grand cross. And that's in your second house of family, the second house of money and worth, and that's ruled by that Mars in the 11th house. So there may be something that you're feeling kind of a little cheated by, you're feeling kind of ignored, or not taken care of in some way. Maybe it's also your values. You're driven by certain values that you're recognizing are extremely important and non-negotiable in terms of your work, in terms of your interactions day to day. And that's where you're driven to change as well. Jupiter's in your ninth, so very, very supportive because it's trinal to you, really helpful. And soon, from the 9th of June, Jupiter will be moving into your 10th. I'll do a separate video about that, but that will be a really big opportunity, again, to expand your connection to your social status, which does include marriage as well. That's also where we find a lot of activity. So after Saturn and Venus connect with the North Node, by the 25th of May, Saturn also moves in to join Neptune in your 7th house of relationship. I'll do a separate video about that. But just to say, this is all part of it. It's all tied in to what is, this step taking you to the next step and going in that direction. And in terms of the new moon in your 8th, if you go back to the cycle that I was underlying there since the end of April 2022, this is a new cycle based on all of that. It's starting again after these 3 years, at starting this thing again, which does also impact us in the smaller cycle, which started in your 7th house, where there was a full moon in your sign at 23 degrees of Libra, connecting the sun with Chiron. So all of this has been teaching you something, creating the understanding you need to move forward in this new way. And Venus being very, very dignified, except a little constrained there by not only by Saturn, but also by being in the 6th house. There's a duty that's connected to this. So just make sure that you're clear what is mine and what is not mine. Is this really my job? And here's that sentence I like to give with all that 6th house feeling of obligation, which is, do I need to do this now? 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 And ask yourself that question, put it on your fridge, and reflect on that a lot. In the next few weeks, you're going to be taking action based on that. All right, Libra, see you in the next video. So, Scorpio, we have your ruler at the top of the chart. You will see a lot about that in the recent video I did with the Mars opposite Pluto video. But here what we have is a lunation in your house of the other, the house of your partner, your spouse or your business partner, or people who are important to you anyway, the way that you relate to people. It's like your social face. Who do you connect to when you sit down? It's the person across the table from you. And so it can also be about a way of being in relationship, or it may be about a specific relationship. I suspect it's about a specific relationship, and a new cycle is important because Venus is in your fifth house of happiness, how you express happiness, of love, and romantic partners. Now, if you're married, that's no longer fifth house. Sorry to say. It's not that you can't be romantic with your spouse, but we put the spouse in the eighth or in the seventh and eighth. So the fifth house is not about marriage, but just to say it's about love. And so the quality of love that is partly contributing to that. There's a new thing coming up here, and there's a new cycle that is going to leave a very karmic imprint in all of that. Now, this can also be about children or creative endeavors in one way or another. There's something about the way you want to express yourself or the way that you have already expressed yourself that is going to be affecting you long term, and especially if you have some specific planets in that part of your chart. Now, this is trinal to you in terms of the conjunction with Saturn, Venus, and the North Node, so that can be very supportive. It may not be something that you experience really, really powerfully unless you also have planets in the last 10 degrees of Scorpio. Now, or if you have both planets in the last 10 degrees of Scorpio as well as in the last 10 degrees of your fifth house where Pisces is. But the also very compelling thing is what your ruler is doing at the top of your chart. All of what we're describing here is also tied into this new drive, new ambition, new sense of what you want out of life, or at least in your social life or career life, where this new dynamic of Mars is, that is going to change your home. It's going to change your foundation in life based on the Pluto in your fourth, which is already underway, 2 years of change already. So this new moon is maybe recommending you, or you're noticing, you're recognizing where that needs to change in terms of who you are spending time with and how the new relationships need to unfold. If you listen to the introduction, you'll see the first quarter moon was there in your fourth house. So this is telling you something already. Going in the week ahead towards that Taurus new moon, you'll get your answer in a week. So good luck with all this, Scorpio, and I'll see you in the next video. Sagittarius, this is happening in your sixth house of work or health or your everyday, the habits of the everyday, the sort of schlepping that needs to be done every day. And that can include also how you realize there are obstacles in your life that need some new approach. And especially as Venus is the ruler of that sixth house and the lunation that's there, she's in your fourth house of what brings you security, what makes you feel secure and grounded. That includes your emotional and psychological nature. It's a new start there in that fourth house that can be quite literally something to do with house and home, like a physical home or property. It can be the connections you have to your lineage and recognizing how those patterns are influencing your health or influencing your psychological well-being or influencing the choices that you've been making. And now this is something that is quite important. It's going to show up as quite a karmic change that might also include a change of job or a change of residence that might be tied together. A change of residence requires a new job, or a change of job requires a new residence. This is all contingent on some of this hitting directly important parts of your natal chart. With the new moon in the sixth house, either way, you have an opportunity to recognize aspects of your daily life that require a reboot. You need to start afresh and do things in a different way. Pluto is in your third house of what is fundamentally true and what you know to be true in terms of the way you communicate, the way you connect with people, the way you speak, This can be about your local space changing as well, the people that you hang out with, like your coffee pals, or if there's an issue of addiction, for example, like your drinking buddies. This can be part of that dynamic, especially as we also have Black Moon Lilith in the 12th, which is part of a T-square, Grand Cross rather, that is emphasizing the T-square that's here. And that can show you where there's some kind of edginess around misbehavior or things that are not helpful for you, or where you realize that there's been something that has been an issue that's not been supportive, or something that's going on behind the scenes that needs to be addressed. And it looks like it's you that needs to address it. There's something here that you need to take control of, because that North Node Saturn with Venus is in the 4th house, and that's really your deeper support network. It can again be your psychological sense of well-being or security, your emotional sense of well-being or security, or located again in terms of the physical house and home, family in general, family issues. Right, and Mars is in your 9th house of your aspiration of this lifetime. What am I here for? What do I want? What do I believe in? What do I have faith in? And Mars is, of course, ruled by that Sun in the 6th house, so it's got to also somehow show up in the way that you do your everyday. Yeah, this is a really big moment in time for you to recognize how your everyday life is actually supporting what you do in a general way. That's true for all of us, but this specifically at this moment in time is for you, Sagittarius, Sun, Moon, or Rising, that this moment in time is supporting all of the other ways of doing your life. So those little details, like how do I take care of myself? Am I feeding myself well? Am I being healthy? Am I in the right job? Am I overworking? All those different things are showing you right now how that's underpinning the rest of your job, rest of your life, but also relationships in general, because the 6th supports the 7th, which is relationships. And that's where your ruler is. Your ruler is in the house of the other, the life partner, the business partner, people in general. And so there's been a lot of reflection on that, where maybe you have also had to discard certain relationships. Jupiter going through there, especially with not such a great dignified Jupiter, it can be where you recognize that there's certain relationships that you need to move away from for your own benefit. It's, of course, beneficial in 2 ways. It's because it's Jupiter, and it's because it's your ruler. So that affects your 4th house as well. So some interesting times, and quite serious times, with Saturn on the North Node in your 4th house. There can be some really major hard work that you need to undergo to create a very new foundation for life. And this is going to hold you for a long time. The Saturn North Node is an 11 or 12-year cycle. So that's a very important dynamic. It's a long-term situation. I've spoken about this in other videos, and you'll find more details in those. So I'll leave it here for you, Sag, and I'll see you in the next video. Capricorn, this new moon is in your 5th house, which is about children and what brings you joy, what makes you feel creative, or how you show your creativity, what hobbies you do, your sense of your self-expression in a general sense. It can also be about risk-taking. What kinds of risks am I ready to take? It's in a square from Pluto, which is in your 2nd house of money and valuables, to the 8th house of what you share with other people. So there may be some financial dynamic to the risk, or it might be a risk in terms of the way that you connect in relationships based on what you realize now is important, or what kind of, let's say, understanding around trust, or understanding around a need to transform the dynamic of what you share with other people. Mars rules your 4th as well, your home, your psychological and emotional foundation in life. And so there's something in the 8th house that you're taking action on that can be something to do with healing, psychological healing, especially as Jupiter is in the 6th, and North Node, Saturn, and Venus are in the 3rd house of the mind. And Jupiter is ruling all of that. So this can also be the banal way. It can be something about a job, the qualities of the job, or the need to adjust to the job. Venus rules your 10th house of career from this 3rd house, where she's with Saturn and the North Node. So there's something really different here, really new, and I've said this in other videos, there's something maybe about a contract or something that you have to discuss, and it's going to be long lasting, so make sure that this is what you really want. And is it in that fifth house way where the new moon is this coming from the heart? Is this coming from what makes you happy? You know, are you selling yourself based on a feeling of needing security, or is this really bringing you joy and happiness? So yeah, the North Node in the third house is also showing you a new way of connecting with people, whether that be sort of geographically in terms of your local space, your neighborhood, or learning new skills, or whatever it is that you need to perhaps teach or communicate in some way that is going to actually become a new way of being. That can also be literally like a new place to live. This is my new neighborhood. This is my new way of living my life. A new schedule, especially as Jupiter's in the sixth, having you working quite hard. There's generally a lot going on when Jupiter is in the sixth house, especially in Gemini, where it's kind of all over the place. And that's ruling your third house, which also has the flavor of all over the place. And lots of travel, lots of movement, and maybe that's for work. Travel, movement for work, travel, movement for health, potentially, health issues, health, you know, care. Yeah, so I'll come with future videos to describe the next events of importance, but I'm going to leave that there. Your ruler is very important right now with this North Node and Venus conjunction in the third house. It can be really important to understand, why do I make choices? Why do I choose the things that I choose? Why do I have the thoughts that I have? What is my way of communicating all of that? How do I connect with my extended family or my siblings? All of that is playing a role in this moment, and it's going to leave a lasting impression. Whatever this is going to take you a long way forward. Now, it's not a quadrant house, so this is probably going to be less like super life-changing unless you have specific planets and points exactly in those areas of the chart, like I said in the beginning. Right, so good luck with that, Capricorn. I'll see you in the next video. So Aquarius, we have, of course, your friend Pluto, your new friend Pluto, your new special friend in your first house, opposed by Mars in your seventh house of relationships. And it's creating a grand cross. Actually, it's a T-square that's extremely important. But actually, if we add in Lilith at the top of your chart, it's a grand cross. And I forgot to mention that in the beginning, but it's something that's quite significant to you because it's part of that dynamic of the axes of your chart. And this new moon is happening in your fourth house of what do I need to feel secure financially, as well as emotionally, psychologically, connected to my family, not connected to my family. How is that all working for me? And this is a really big moment for you. The ruler of your fourth is in the second house of money and your family as well. What supports me? And with the North Node and Saturn with Venus there, there's a need to be serious yourself about what supports you, what valuables you have, what is the value of them to you, what is your value. That's all very significant. And there's something that you may realize that you need to do yourself, that you can't rely on. So Saturn being your ruler, it's already a quality that you have, is a more sort of self-reliant kind of energy that's there. Not always by design or by desire, but it's certainly part of your makeup. And here where Saturn, your ruler, is in the second house, there's something, and with this incredibly karmic, powerful conjunction with Venus and the North Node, and last week it was also with Mercury, there's something really urgent that is going to shift your life. Meaning urgent, meaning you're already feeling it. It's like, I know this is it has to change. My money has to change. My relationship to my family has to change. My life based on my values has to change. You've got Jupiter in the fifth house ruling that, and the fifth house is what brings me joy, what makes me smile, what brings me that creative spark. And that's also based in your values. Maybe about children as well, notions of how to deal with children, whether it's about having them or not having them, or what's going on with them. Are there expenses related to having children that you need to deal with, or ways that you need to connect with them? So Mercury, which is ruling that house of children, is in your third house of communication right now. So there's something, this bigger dynamic here that is going to be long lasting in terms of what you value and how you operate from those values and what you possess. And is it worth it? With Saturn on the North Node, it could be a really good time to let go, or really listen to the introduction and really consider shedding all the baggage, all the stuff that you don't need. You also have the South Node anyway, moving through the 8th house. So you're letting go of things that you shared with other people. And that includes even, psychological baggage, influence from the family that you grew up with, or the people that run through your lineage. Overcoming issues of mistrust and feelings of insecurity as well. This is a good time to establish all of that on the grounds of something that you believe in. Your modern ruler, Uranus, which I tend not to use, but anyway, it's worth mentioning that Uranus is in your 4th house of home, but that also is about your family of origin, but also where do I live, the property I own, what does home feel like? That certainly has been shaken up for the last 7 years. And soon Uranus will go into that 5th house and shake up the relationship you have to your self-expression and your children and what you create and what brings you joy. That's an entrepreneurial house as well. So again, this could be that you decide, actually, I really want to be self-employed. Maybe you're employed already, you're now employed, and now you're self-employed. I want to do this new thing, maybe have home-based business. The moon rules your 6th house of work, working from home. Maybe this is the new thing. Maybe it's an obligation. Maybe you don't have a choice. For many people these days, there's an imperative to change around how we work, how we earn money. But it could also be, how am I investing my money? Is that working for me? Am I being a bit spendthrift, or am I taking risks that I'm not comfortable taking? So this would be the time also to reflect on all of that. So good luck with all of that, Aquarius. I'll see you in the next video. Pisces. First of all, this new moon is happening in your 3rd house, which is about choice. It's about the friends and the people that you connect with locally. It's about things that you know and that are practical, that you can use going forward in any way, including the ways that you communicate through language or through skills that you bring, or even artistic skills. And especially because Venus is your exaltation ruler and the ruler of your 3rd house, as well as being the ruler of your 8th house of marriage and intimacy, is in a really strong place in your 1st house of self. And with Saturn and the North Node, something really big is changing for Pisces, especially if you have planets in the last 10 degrees of Pisces. Something really dynamic and different is happening, and it's going to be long lasting. It's going to change. Based on the Saturn North Node, it's a change of about 10 or 12 years, but actually it's going to change your life in a dramatic way, in a new way. When I say dramatic, don't freak out. It means big. It means noticeable. And that's something that you can expect, because you already feel inside, especially since January, especially also maybe with Saturn for the last 2 years going through your 1st house, that things have to be different. And now there's this new cycle of change that's showing up. For you, the 3rd house is maybe less important in terms of the lunation than the North Node, Saturn, and Venus, where I think that's going to be showing you much more of this. But the Venus rulership of your 3rd house at this stage is quite significant. And this can also be something to do with not only just planning around a new location or a new day-to-day, like what do I want to do with my everyday, but also a new place to live, because Jupiter, your ruler, is also in the 4th house, and that's home. And where do I live? Where do I feel safe and secure? What is my homeland and my relationship to all of that? And Mars is in your 6th house of the everyday and where you work and how you work, and that's ruling your income house, money and possessions, and also related to family in general. And it's in opposition to Pluto in your 12th. And so there may be some dynamic here about moving far away. Mars rules your ninth house of long distance travel with a purpose. And that this is telling a story about finance, money, income, possessions, family, all those things that support you, but in the sixth house. And now it can also meaning work. So something about work is changing based on that dynamic. I mentioned a lot about this already in the previous video with the Mars opposite Pluto, but with this new moon, it's putting more of a focus on your choice. The third house is about what you choose, how you use your willpower, how you decide, I'm going in this direction. This is the thing I need. This is what I want. It can be about relationships in general with siblings and cousins and extended family. That's potentially a part of that. Third house is skills as well. Maybe there's a recognition. I need to develop these new skills to get where I want to go with all of the rest of what I've just said here. Yeah, big times, Pisces. I will come back in another video to describe all of the other movements that we're having in the next few weeks. There's an extraordinary amount of change, so think long term, very personal to you. Think about yourself and your role in your life and how you integrate that role in the life of other people in terms of relationships, because that South Node is also in your seventh house of relationships. There might be something you need to let go of there, or it's letting go of a way you do the relating to other people that you're no longer going to tolerate a way of relating to other people that needs to change. That can be another scenario. I'd need to see your chart to be able to tell you more about that. So I do wish you all the best, and I will see you in the next video. Pisces, take good care. Bye-bye.